So what time is the class over? I know we don't have a lot of time.
Let's go to noon.
Okay, fine. Would you mind, please come up here, that way I can center. So, yeah, I've been teaching, thank you, almost 50 years now. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I didn't start yesterday. But honestly, it feels like I started yesterday. That's honestly how I feel. I don't feel any different about hardly anything now than I did when I started, but yet I feel different about everything. I started teaching in Weiser, Idaho. You know, that's not, I mean, it's far away from here, but not too far. It's a lot further from Miami. Weiser is here. So think about Idaho. Can you see it in your mind's eye? On the corner of Weiser, not Weiser, but Idaho, is Oregon, and I believe Utah, right where all those states come together. And right in the middle of that corner of Idaho is a desert. It's the Oahe Desert. That's where I started teaching. My first job was 1 through 6, local. And my second job was actually in Weiser. I taught flutophones. I don't know if they still do that or not. That's what I taught. And I taught beginning band, I taught middle school band, and I taught high school band. So if my high school band wasn't very good, I didn't have to go very far to find out why. Now, I'll tell you that because you guys, you're all you music ed, right? So you're me. I mean, there's no difference between me and you. What's the difference?
Experience.
Yeah, 50 years, but take away that 50 years, and I'm in the exact same place you are now, getting ready to go out and teach. And my point is that you can achieve the things that you want to achieve if you really want to achieve. I've got some questions for you. I got a lot of stuff for you. So I left teaching public school, and I went to the University of Connecticut. And I was at the University of Connecticut for 10 years. Then I left the University of Connecticut and went to the University of Miami, where I finished my career. I was there for 22 years. So if somebody would have told me when I was in Weiser that I was going to go to the University of Miami and teach, and I was going to work with some of the greatest musicians I've ever could even imagine, not the least of which was Ben's teacher, Gil Johnson, trumpet teacher, and faculty, and worked with some of the greatest composers in the world. When I was in Weiser, there's no way I could have known that. So I would never have dreamed my life. It was impossible to dream my life because I didn't even know it was there. All I knew was a desert in Idaho. And I knew that I wanted to be a band director. And I knew that I needed to teach, and I knew that I needed to teach well. That's all I knew. I made a whole bunch of mistakes. Yeah, but I'll tell you this. In the mistakes you make will be an answer about what you will become and how you address those mistakes. If it's a mistake and you're knocked down by it and you don't get up and think about it, and if you don't address the issues that caused you to make that mistake, or at least feel like you made a mistake, then you'll never correct it. There's no way. A mistake is a mistake. Everybody makes them. There's not one person in the world that doesn't make them. I promise you. I make them all the time. I try not to. My whole premise in my life is to try to be as good a person as I can be, and there's no self-aggrandizing there. I mean, it's humbling. I try, and then I fail. Been married for 48 years. Had 2 great children, 2 grandchildren, so that's the reward of trying. But I just got the right person. I still want to teach. We'll probably never see each other again. And so these few minutes that we'll have together are important to share with you. The thing I want to leave with you at the very end of this is that you have to work really hard to do this. This is not easy. You guys have picked the hardest thing in the world to do. You could have made a lot more money. I guarantee you could make a lot more money than what you're going to make as a teacher. So here's a few questions. What kind of teacher do you want to be? I mean, that's a serious question. And what is it that you want to say in your teaching? And I think you need to think about that. Nobody ever asked me that question when I was a kid. Nobody asked me that question. I had to kind of make it up, and maybe that is at the end the best thing to do. I'm not sure, because I never thought about it. I just in my heart, I liked people, and I wanted to be a good teacher. I wasn't, but I had a reunion with my first high school band, Weezer, Idaho, about 4 years ago. Now imagine being gone from a place for 45 years minimum, and going back and seeing the students that you had, they were sophomores, juniors, seniors. They're near 60 now, so they were no longer. We talked about the things they did, but to go back, it was like I had been there, but I'd never been there before. So things in you that are at work are complex, but the idea of what kind of teacher do you want to be? What's your motivation? What is it that motivates you? These are powerful, powerful thoughts, you guys. And if you can come to grips with these things, then it will help you when you go out in Weezer, Idaho, in your little towns, and nothing's happening the way you want it to happen. You can make it happen. Then you'll be strong enough to let it happen. That's better. Making something happen implies that you're in charge, and really you're not. You're part of something. You're part of something that's great, teaching young people. And teaching them things that you love. And if you don't love this, then don't try to do it. If you're doing it for any other reason other than the fact that you have to, then it's going to be really hard for you. So what you believe in the very base of who you are, that belief is critical for you. And I want you to think about it. I want you to deal with it. Because a belief is something that cannot be shaken. And it's going to you're going to have kids that can't play anything. So how do you get them to play something? What do you do to motivate them so that they will want to play something? It's that belief that's inside of you that will not be unnoticed. I've learned from so many people and continue to, but I'll put myself in harm's way every time so I can learn something. For me, it's always just what's just on the other side of the door. What is it that I'll put myself in a position of reckless abandon so I can learn something. And it's tough. It's a hard way to do it. But for me, if I don't put myself there, then who's going to put me there? If I sit back and I do the things that I know, and I do those things that I know really well, what have I learned? Zero. Learned nothing, because you already know it. So it's a belief system in what you're doing and why you're doing it. Where are you right now? What is your thinking right now? When I was your age, I kind of remember. It's very difficult to remember exactly. But I kind of remember. All I could think about was that I wanted to get out of school, and I was not a good student. I learned things the hard way, it seems like, for me every time. But I just wanted to go out and teach band, because that's what I wanted to do. I didn't think much about music. I love music. I appreciate it. And I'll tell you where my passion, where my soul comes from in just a minute. But it wasn't in any school. I mean, that's all I wanted to do. So I wasn't very well equipped. Really. I had to learn it the hard way. Seems like it's been And then the question is, if you know where you are now, and if you have an idea of what kind of teacher you want to be, how do you get there? And I hope that you will design this path. I really do. I hope that we'll talk to each other about it. Talk to each other about things that you love and things that you like and things that you don't like. So sometimes it's hard to know where you want to go, but at least you can have a step. You can have a beginning. Everything's got a beginning. And so then it'll change. Philosophically, morally, the person that you are won't change much, I don't think. It might. I don't know you well enough. But the true things, the values that you have, real values stay with you forever. They kind of grow up a little bit, mature a bit. We'll talk a little bit about that too. Well, but if you can have a plan, even if it's going to change the first job you get, then you'll at least have an idea about how you're going to get there. And then what is it that's stopping you from doing it? Job hunting, and resumes, and lessons to learn, and things to teach, people to meet. All these things are important. And the biggest thing in all this is how can you overcome all of this? By overcome, I mean how can you face a problem? So I'm in Weiser, Idaho, and there was nobody there to teach the clarinet. So who was going to teach clarinet in Weiser, Idaho? Me. I'm a French horn player. Was. Not anymore. But I'm not a clarinet player. But I practice clarinet every day. Flute, bassoon, oboe. I can tell you alternate fingerings. I was never a very good percussionist. I wasn't physically able to do it. But yet, today in my teaching, percussion is one of the first things I think about because the sounds are so important to us. So I can remember once in Weiser, we were playing Clifton Williams, probably Fanfare and Labor. I know it was a Clifton Williams piece. I remember that very clearly. It was way beyond what we should have been playing at the time. You guys know about Clifton Williams music? It's good because he wrote some really great stuff for band. So the clarinets kept coming on, it was on Friday, and every day when we'd get to this particular place in this piece, the clarinets would just like fold. Just, you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. You just crash and burn. And so like any other band director, I was frustrated, and I stomped my foot and kind of warned, take your horns home tonight, because you need to practice, because we're not getting any better than this in the clarinets. I looked right straight at the first clarinet player, and she's her head shaking up and down. So into school on Friday, I go back to the instrument storage room, and every instrument was in there, of course. Nobody took a horn home. Nobody. Well, I mean, I'm just, so I took one of the clarinets home, had a mouthpiece, had a reed, so I took the clarinet home. And so on Saturday and Sunday, all I did was practice the clarinet on that part. My dog left, my wife left, everybody was just like, get him out of here. But I practiced on that part. So Monday comes, and what happens, we get to put her horn back in there. So it was undisturbed as far as she was concerned. So Monday when we got to that place, of course it crashed and burned, so I looked at her and I said, let me have your horn. In a disgusting way, I'm sure. And so she gave me her horn, I put my mouthpiece on there and my reed, and I nailed it. I mean, boom. It was like, see there? If she had had me play one more note, it would have been all over. But she didn't know that. I could play that. And her eyes were this big, and all of them, so they took their horns home. So you have to have an imagination, and you have to want these students to play what your imagination is telling you to play. It is not what's on the page. Is there a piece of music paper? Somebody got something in there? Anything? Doesn't matter. Yeah. That's good, right there, in, yeah, true. So there is nothing, there's no sound on here. Not one sound. We could put this up on a wall and frame it, and it'd be the same. I mean, there's nothing here. We can read it. There's tons of information here. More information actually than we could really come to ourselves. I mean, honestly, there's so much information here that it's overwhelming to me. It looks very simple, but to me, even looking at it, the first thing I see is just question after question after question after question after question. But there's no answer. So how do we get from this to how you want your kids to play in Weezer, Idaho, or anywhere else for that matter? It has to be imagination. Has to be. And that's the development of an ear. You have to develop your ear, and it's going to take you a long time. An ear is not whether something's sharp or flat, and an ear is not whether something's too fast or too slow. An ear is everything. Everything. And so if I have a piece of music and I have a flute playing, so I could ask you, what does a flute sound like? And everybody in here can imagine a flute. And you can imagine a good flute. Because we have so many examples of it. You have live examples, and you have recordings. It's a lot drier here than it is in Miami, you guys. So forgive me my hesitation. So, but we can all hear a flute, and we can hear a good flute. So if you look at a line on a score, and you see the flute, and you can hear how pitches work, then you can imagine what that sounds like. Now, if we have an oboe that has the same part, we can hear the oboe. We can hear, because we've got, the thing is, at the beginning, you need to play all these instruments. You need to play them really well. So I'm sure you guys heard that before, but it's the truth, and that's the beginning of your ear. That really is how it feels to play. Things, to me, are intellectual for sure, but they're more soulful than they are intellectual. To me, things happen in terms of human, in terms of that's part of it, but to be human and to be totally given to something that's greater than yourself.
Existentialism?
It could be. It could be. So now we know what a flute is, and we know what an oboe is, right? What if they play together? Now you got a flow. Now what does that sound like?
A flow?
Yeah, why not? You have a whole different sound. You don't have flute and you don't have oboe, they're playing together, so now you got another sound. And that's just one example. What does that sound like? That's the beginning of an imagination. And it's far more complex than that. What if you have, I mean, just think about looking at your scores. You guys look at scores all the time. Being able to examine those scores and to discover sound is so enlightening and so thrilling. I have been fortunate to work with the greatest composers in the world today and look at their music and say, what in the world is that? And have to realize that every day I went to school, every day I went to rehearsal at the University of Miami, I was petrified. I was so nervous not because I hadn't worked, because I'd worked my rear end off, but because I was not sure that I was going to be able to give them the information that was inside of me from the composer. And I didn't want to waste their time. And that's the truth. I mean, it finally, toward the end, was unbearable because it got worse and worse. Because the music was more and more difficult. I loved it, and still do. I miss it. But my point is that it is your imagination, your ability to dream outside of, to take a piece of music and look at it and realize it in your ear. Don't try to do it tomorrow, because you can't. And you cannot do it because you want to. You do it because you work at it. Every single day of your life, you go to a place where it's quiet and where there's nobody else around, and you visit that place every single day with your music or your work or whatever it is, and you work hard and not to be compromised by any sound or anything, and you work at it, and you look at it, and you sing it, and you do everything that you can. Play it if you can. Do whatever you can, but you have to go every day. Now, there are times when you can take some time off. But I'm telling you that if you want to, and when you guys go teach, you're going to sell cheese and sausage. You're going to order buses. When I was a band director in Weezer, I had to drive the bus. I can remember running over bushes and stuff. I mean, but I wasn't so much, it was, I think I knew this kind of stuff, but I just didn't know. But if you'll do this every single day, I promise you, you'll get good at it, and you'll get good at it a lot faster than I did. And that's important. If you can't play a good sound, if you can't sing a good sound, you can't teach one. So this idea of what your group is going to sound like is going to be directly related to you. You know, people go to contests, you know. They're not rating the ensemble. They're rating your ability to teach. And that's, I don't want to talk about contest necessarily, but I do want to emphasize the fact that it is you. Okay, I want you guys to look at something. What does that look like to you guys?
A church with horses and in front of it with like a door going into it, and like Don Giovanni. I think of Don Giovanni.
Cool, that's good. Anybody else? Do you think an adult drew this or a child?
I think a child drew that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's a colony.
Okay.
There's a church in the middle of the colony.
Cool.
With other shops or houses around it.
Great.
Well, I don't think I didn't church.
What'd you get?
I got a carnival.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it kind of looks like flags flying, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay. So where you guys are now is where you should be when you start to study. Just like that. Music is more than, we're going to talk a little bit about it, but that's okay. Well, let me show you guys something now. This is a guy, just imagining, this is a man who's probably, when this was drawn, was probably 65. And he's just daydreaming, just like we just did. And he comes up with this. That's the Walt Disney Performance Center in Los Angeles. This is Frank Gehry's rendering when he was just daydreaming of a building that became world class. This is the only time that I've ever realized in concrete terms. You know, we talk about things that are undecipherable, really. Because how do you explain these things? What does chicken taste like? You can't explain it. So, but this is imagination that becomes reality.
Abstract thinking as compared to logistical thinking.
Well, there's a lot that went from here to here. The blueprints and the people that went into practice to make, and we're going to talk about that next. If you don't have an active imagination, I'm not sure that you can ever get to the point where the notes mean more to you than just being in tune.
Interpretation of what you see emotionally.
I think so. Could be.
Yeah. Basically what the composer was trying to convey in whatever music you're performing, like the pavane as compared to like maybe like Flight of the Valkyrie.
It depends on what you're trying to say. Look, when I was a middle school teacher, you guys know the musical clairvoyant? Yeah. You know Albert Oliver Davis? Well, maybe, I'll bet you will before you get out of here. But these guys, Frank Erickson, these are guys that were, these were some of the greatest writers for middle school band, and they did other things as well. But these guys knew how to write, so you could teach things that matter. And so, okay. I want to make an impression on you that it's okay to use your imagination. It's okay to daydream. It's okay. I do all the time. I read all the time. People say, well, I don't have time to read. Well, yeah, you have to find some time. And it shouldn't always be books that have to do with what you do. It can be just silly books. But offer yourself some space. I talked to a guy once that had his daily practice down. He knew when he was going to give himself that 5 minutes of time. I could never do that. I was never that. I wish I could have been, but I wasn't. But I want you to, at least from my perspective, and you, listen, you're going to hear from people all your lives that are going to tell you things. I'm telling you these things from my life. I can only tell you what I know. I can't tell you what somebody else knows. I could, but I would fail miserably. I wouldn't know how to present it. So the thing here that I want you to realize is that to use your imagination when you play, to use your imagination when you study a score is critical. Honest to goodness is critical, and it's more fun. It's a lot more fun. The score is not always 6-0. It can be, in what you're doing, is something greater than that. Okay. So, what's the difference between, here's one more thing before I go into that. So, tell me a little bit about Percy Granger. Can you guys tell me anything about Granger that you know? Can you tell me a piece that he's written? Have you talked about, yeah?
We talked about what we get with.
Yeah, I think your boat's a big.
One that I always liked was Banks and Brains upon the Deep.
Love it. Love it.
That was another one. Children's Mark?
Children's Mark would be Percy Granger.
Yeah. I think that's the one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I bet you that there are probably others. You just, when the person asks you a question like that, blank, you know, go, oh, I don't want to have them out. As you grow older, a Percy Granger will mean more to you. I've been playing, well, the reason why I wanted to be a high school band director, and this is the truth, because when I was I was playing in high school band, I heard a band do Think It's Your Posy. And that's a long time ago, the pieces are pretty old. And so I wanted to have a band that could play Think It's Your Posy. That was my motivation, pretty much totally. I think there were other things, but that, from a repertoire point of view, that was the thing that really, and I played Think It's Your Posy many times and loved it. I did it with my high school band when I taught at Boise, Idaho. But we did movements 1, 2, 4, and 6. 1, 2, 4, and 6. We didn't do 3 or 5 because those are the hard ones. Those are all hard, but those are the hardest ones. And so when I finally got a high school band that could play Think It's Your Posy, I wanted more Hindeman Symphony and First Kennedy and stuff like that. It's always been repertoire that has challenged my thinking, always. But I never thought, I found a book. Now, I am 73 years old now, and about 4 years ago, I found a book by Percy Granger. Now, I've read, you guys, the more you get to know about somebody, the more you will want to know about them. Like Percy Granger or whoever it is that you're into. You can, I'm a Mahler freak. I mean, I can't get enough. I can't know enough. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you how freaked out I was. Many years ago, I was asked by the orchestra conductor at the University of Miami, who was going to go on sabbatical, if I would conduct the orchestra for one concert. And I said no. And he said, well, why not? I said, because I don't know the rep. I mean, I know about it, but I've never conducted it, so I don't want to conduct an ensemble that I don't know, especially when they can play. So I thought about it, and I thought, well, I've got tenure. They're not going to fire me. So why not? So I went up and I said, yeah. He said, there were 2 pieces I wanted to do. I wanted to do Mahler 1, or I wanted to do Stravinsky, The Ride is Free. And I didn't do Mahler because I didn't feel like I could. But I thought, well, what the heck, I'll do the Rite of Spring. Of course, he turned pale as the ghost. But I thought, well, I'd done a lot of Stravinsky. It's just a great big old band piece with strings added, so what the heck, I'll do it, you know. So I did, and I loved it. Why didn't I do Mahler? Think about it. In Stravinsky, there's all these asymmetric tempos and all these billions of notes and stuff. So, and you know what's on the first page of Mahler 1? 7 octaves of A, whole notes. That's it. And a bunch of German that I could not even begin to understand. And I'm thinking, how do you, and it's like, what is it? As if a sound of nature was the instruction from Mahler. 7 octaves of A, as if a sound of nature. And I'm sitting in Miami, Florida going like, I don't think I can get to that. The visceral power of Rite of Spring I could deal with. 7 octaves of A, pianissimo, I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't even begin. My imagination, I wasn't even ready. The next time, I read so much about Mahler that, I mean, I read everything, and I listened, and I looked at scores, and I worked every day. And the next time I did Mahler 1, and it was one of the great experiences of my life, because I knew every day that I was in the presence of greatness. Every day. There was no fat in there. It was all, this is real. And so I understood Mahler a little better, and I was ready. So here's a quote. So there's this book about Granger that I was telling you guys about. So there's all kinds of books. There's a biography by a guy by the name of Bird, and there's all kinds of things you can find. If you want to read about Granger, you can find it. But there's a book. It's a green book, and I think the name of the book is In My Own Words, and it is not not a biography, and it's not a story of his life. It's a book about this thick, you guys, and it's a collection of letters and memos that he had written in his life. So these are not paraphrase of Granger. This is Granger talking to us today. Now, the only thing that I caution you about is I'm not always clear about the context in which the conversation took place. So if you have a conversation with somebody one day and you feel really bad, you might say something that one day that you wouldn't say the next day when you feel really good. So I'm not sure about the context, but I do know one thing, that this is Granger speaking. And Granger says, now, I tell you this because it was such a hammer on my psyche, because I'd never read anything like this. And this was Granger talking to me, and I'm going like, well, I've been conducting Granger forever. Why didn't I know this? So Granger says in this book, I'll tell you what, guys, you'll need to try to copy this down. I'll try to get this copy for you so that you can have it, if you care to have it. Okay, he says, Granger says, and the worth of my music will never be guessed, or its value to mankind felt, until the approach to my music is consciously undertaken as a pilgrimage to sorrow. Other composers have based the appeal of their music on broad formal effects and on orchestrational brilliance, contrast of tone colors, or on clever manipulations of intervals. I know nothing of these things. And he goes on to talk more. And when I read that, I never thought about that. I never thought about it. It was never in my thinking. It was never even possible for me to. It was never even possible for me to think of something like that, because I've read Granger and I knew what kind of a weirdo he was and all that kind of stuff, but I'd never taken it personally. I'd never known him. I'd known him superficially, but when he spoke to me through all those years, it made a difference. It makes a difference now in how I feel. How it would manifest itself in my imagination, I'm not sure. I haven't dealt with it. I have not done a Granger since then, but that's this part of my brain, not this part. So I have to deal with it. I hope you follow my logic. So you're going to go out and teach these little kids. We've talked about the way I feel about teaching little kids, and all of it, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're gonna teach high school, middle school, elementary. So can you see yourself now in an elementary school teaching a kid how to play the clarinet? Try to put yourself in front of this little 5th grader. There's nothing better. There's nothing better than taking that clarinet out of the case for the first time and smelling it. I mean, just there's a smell about it. A clarinet or a trombone. I mean, open these cases, you can smell it. That is real. And it's inside. It's part of your DNA. It's part of who you are. So you take that clarinet out of the case and you teach that kid how to put a mouthpiece without a reed on a barrel. And you teach that kid that this is a way that they can express themselves that they can't do any other way. How do you express how you feel with an instrument? Even if you're like a beginning 5th or 6th grader, there's a lot more stuff on there, you guys. This thing came from a graduate student of mine, and I'll talk to you a bit more, so just kind of put it face down for now once you get it. I'm glad you have it. But I want to, we'll wrap up here fairly too quick. So, can you accept the responsibility of taking a 6th grader or a 5th grader and teaching them how to put a clarinet together and not letting them just like slam it together? Teaching them the importance of doing it correctly so that they don't break it and they don't ruin the reed. How many band rooms will you go into where the reed is so chipped and so broken that it won't make a sound if you wanted to? Lots. Unfortunately, lots. So what I'm suggesting, what I'm saying is for you, the kids can only play at the level of the equipment and its condition. So it doesn't mean that it's got to be the best horn in the whole world. It's got to be in the best condition it can be in order for a kid to make sound. So when I started band, when I was a kid, 5th grade, I wanted to play trumpet because it was shiny. I liked it. And it was high. I could hear it. I watched the local high school band march up and down the homecoming parade, and I thought, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. So when it came time to an instrument, I wanted to play trumpet, and I went to my mother and I said, I'd like to play in the band. And she said, well, I'm sorry, but you can't because we don't have the money to rent a horn. It probably wasn't more than $1.50 a semester at that point in time. And we didn't have it. We just didn't have the money. And I was kind of upset about it. I didn't care that my mother was struggling to make ends meet. We lived in not much of a house. I was just upset that I couldn't play in the band. So I didn't know about being rich or poor. I just wanted to play in the band. So the next year, 6th grade, came back and they came to the school again and doing their bit for the school band. And so I said to my mother, I'd like to play trumpet. She said, we can't. Well, this time, by the grace of everything that's right in the world, Mr. Bright, my high school band director, happened to be in the room when my mother said that she didn't have the money. And he overheard her. He came over and he said, well, I have a mellophone. Not much of a horn, but if you'll start on the mellophone, I think we could move into French horn later. And he brought that thing out. It was not gold. It was like tarnished silver. And it wasn't even the right hand for the French horn. It was this hand, like a trumpet. And I was so disappointed that he cleaned that thing up and he gave me lessons on that thing. He taught me how to play with that old horn. So I'm telling you that it is not the condition, it doesn't have to be the best instrument in the world, but it has to be the best that that instrument can be. Otherwise, you simply cannot expect them to play well. And so then it goes right back to the questions we talked about at the very beginning. And that is, what kind of teacher you want to be? 8 to 5? No. You come early and you stay late. And that doesn't mean that you have to come at 4 o'clock in the morning and go home at midnight. That means that every day you go to that place to learn what you're doing. And use your imagination every single day. And there's not a day that you can skip. Well, I take that back out. Maybe if there's a good football game or something going on, why not? I do, for sure. But you know what I'm talking about. I mean, if you want to be, it isn't, okay, we're talking about maturity early, right? So think about this, maturing as a person or as a musician, everything's based on humanity, being a human being. So maturing is you insert musician, person, is the selfless immersion in the process with no consideration of the product. If you're doing what you're doing just because you want to play a good concert, you're in it for the wrong reason. If you're doing it because somebody will tell you how good a teacher you are or what a good job you've done, it's the wrong reason. It's hard to get over that. Because we're all human. We all just have an ego. Me too. And I deal with this kind of stuff. Maturing is selfless. I mean, why are you going to work to find the right music to teach your kids what they need to know? It's process. It's always process. The product is just is more work in progress. But if you're thinking about concert, gotta get ready for a concert, gotta get ready for a concert, then you're not thinking about teaching kids how to play and doing the things that you can do. So it's selfless. If somebody tells you how good you are, that's okay. If somebody tells you how poor you are, that's okay too. Both of those sides of the coin are imposters. They don't have any real truth in them. The truth lies centered in who you are and what you're trying to do. That's honest. I mean, you can survive this stuff if you believe and if you are doing it. And I'm not good at it, but I know it's right. I try, and I'll keep trying. As long as I have air, I'll keep trying. And there's a lot of reasons why I believe it. Nonetheless, is because I just know that kids deserve to experience things that are wonderful in their lives, because we get slammed with stuff that isn't. Music is critical in the education of a child because it separates us from a lot of other things. And I don't think I'm philosophical. I don't think I want to go there. It's too much. But I do know that if you'll try, and be a good teacher and teach the best music you know to teach, you will not fail. You can't. It doesn't mean you got to be the best teacher. It doesn't mean you have to have the best band. It doesn't mean anything except that you have to try to do all the things that you're being taught and to do the things the way that you know they have to be done. I believe it, you guys. I believe it with all my heart and all my soul. And I haven't always done it, but I try, honestly. Okay, so just think about that. Just every day as you go through your stuff here at the school,